Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of the Crown Report. My name is Brittany. It is Tuesday, November 4th, and there is so much royal news going on. So much because we do have obviously Prince William over there in Brazil for the Earthshot Prize. I believe they're giving out the awards this evening. We have some new details from King Juan Carlos as he gets ready for his memoir to be published. There's some very, very fascinating little tidbits we can definitely glean from that because Spain was in a very unique situation with its king because Juan Carlos became king after the death of dictator Francisco Franco. And Juan Carlos has some interesting thoughts on that and some, you could say, peculiar reflections. And you can't help but wonder, okay, is this age? Is this truth? Are things somewhere in between? Because obviously there was a lot going on in Spain at that time. We do also have a detailed interview from Princess Ingrid Alexandra of Norway as she begins and continues her studies in Australia. She talks a bit about her brother, her parents, her family, whether or not she prefers Norwegian skiing or Australian surfing, because she does also surf in Norway. So she gives some of those details. We also have obviously a lot of the royals in Egypt for the opening of the Grand Egyptian Museum and so many other things. And I'm super excited as well because I was working on today. So for some reason, I didn't focus, let's say, as much on the big stories. But guys, I do have a full basically outline of all the little royal news tidbits from the last week. So if you want all sort of the royal news that you can handle, I will be sending out that email probably tomorrow morning is probably going to be the plan, in addition to the re-upload here as well. So look forward to that. I am so excited to be able to share that with you guys for sure. And so let's go ahead and get into it, of course, here. And we do have just a couple things to start off. We have Russ Masu, who became a YouTube member. Why, thank you so much, Russ Masu. And we have Lizzie B, who gifted one Royal News Network membership. Why, thank you so much, Lizzie. And Carol as well, two of our biggest supporters here. Thank you guys so much. That is so exciting. And I'm sure somebody is going to really, really appreciate it. But let's go ahead and take a look here at a bit of some of the things that we've seen from the Earthshot Prize. We're just going to pull up the Prince and Princess of Wales's Instagram because that's where we can see just so much of what is going on here. And so we have, starting off with the day with Prince William, who was given the keys to the city of Rio de Janeiro by I believe it's the mayor there, Eduardo Paes. So I thought that was really cool and very much a reflection of sort of definitely within, let's say, Brazil and other countries' interest in the environment and everything. And of course, a royal visit is always a big deal. And so he also went up to Sugarloaf Mountain there in Rio, getting an overview of the city. And he also got to meet with a lot of people. And I'm still so excited that the royals are doing selfies. I was sort of worried that those would at some point sort of go away because obviously we did have that one instance where this woman grabbed Catherine around like in a headlock basically. And it was in the vein of being friendly, but no, if people keep doing that, we will no longer get royal selfies. So I think it's great that they were still able to do that and able to obviously meet up and see William. And we have a little, of course, short video from the Buckingham or Kensington Palace team here as well, as William shares some of his time there. And he's also there for a COP, which is a climate meeting there in Brazil. So he gets to represent his father doing that and also gets to represent his Earthshot Prize there as well. So, and then they do go down to the beach, and I think we'll see a little bit of that beach action. He also hung out with some young soccer pros here. And so he's introducing Generation Earthshot, which is uniting 75 young change makers from Brazil and beyond for a 4-day leadership program, building skills, exchanging ideas, and being inspired by sporting legends and shaping the climate leaders of tomorrow. So looks like they had a lot of fun there, got to meet with a lot of young people and hear their ideas. And then William also checked out Copacabana Beach and played a little bit of beach volleyball. So His Royal Highness definitely got into the game and definitely gave it his all here. So that was just sort of fun to see. And I think down below the equator now, it would be summer or close to it. So I'm sure it's probably quite warm there. But William definitely, I mean, he's getting into the beach volleyball. I got to give him credit there. He's definitely not shy about jumping up and getting dirty and getting in the sand and everything. And I think that's awesome for people to see. And so they have the United for Wildlife Global Summit 2025, which will also be in Rio. So they're combining a lot of ideas together, which I think is great. When you can do multiple things at a particular event, I think it allows people to engage more and make it more worthwhile to either travel there, work there, what have you. So they have CEOs from global companies, government leaders, indigenous peoples, and community leaders around the world, tech innovators, philanthropists, law enforcement, or philanthropois, law enforcement, Brazilian cultural icons, and civil society. And we should see Giselle Bundchen at one of these events because I think she is on there, the Earthshot Prize board this year because it is in Brazil. And she's, of course, a very iconic figure of Brazil. And so they went to see how the local communities and peoples are protecting mangroves there and passing the information on through the generations. Oh, the crab. The crab's so cute. So it's important for fishermen and crab gatherers. And so, as part of all this effort that William is doing here for the Earthshot Prize, he did give an interview to Hello Magazine. And he talked a lot about his family here. So I did get this through Apple News. And so the green issue, his greatest gift, Prince of Wales tells Hello why his children are his biggest inspiration for protecting the planet as he heads to Brazil for this year's Earthshot Prize. And so he says an exclusive interview with Hello. As a father, I think constantly about the world my children will inherit. I want them to grow up surrounded by nature, opportunity, and a sense of hope about the future. But I also know that unless we act boldly now, that future is at risk. The Earthshot Prize is about turning the tide, about proving to our children that we are willing to fight for their tomorrow. So it says a sense of hope is key to the prince's mindset when it comes to tackling issues such as climate change, pollution, and restoring the natural world. Urgent optimism is a heartbeat for the Earthshot Prize, he said. It's belief that although challenges we face are immense, the solutions are within reach and we must act with speed and conviction to bring them to life. It's not blind hope. It's hope backed by evidence, by ingenuity, and the courage of those who refuse to give up on our planet. So let's see. Was this Prince William who responded here? Says, feel deeply honored to be heading to Brazil, a country of extraordinary natural beauty and cultural vibrancy. Rio, with its energy, its people, and its iconic landscapes, feels like the perfect place to celebrate the power of environmental innovation. So Prince William spent his gap year or at least part of his gap year in Chile. He says this region is home to some of the world's most vital ecosystems and some of the most passionate environmental defenders. By hosting the prize in Brazil, we're shining a light on solutions emerging from this part of the world and drawing global attention to the urgency and opportunity of climate action. So that's just a part of it there. We have some pictures. This is from last year in South Africa. And then behind the scenes, I should say, William is already helping shaping this year's finalists. He's happy to roll up his sleeves and get on the phone and travel to meetings. He's always thinking about how we can create new opportunities for our finalists. He enjoys supporting their leadership and their ideas. So this must be from Jason Knaft. He is really, really focused on how we can do more. He will congratulate our finalists for what they're achieving and help them be even more ambitious. He knows we have to do more. So there's William and his father planting a tree. So very, very exciting for William to obviously give an interview about this and share once again his passion for this. We do have the finalists here: revive our oceans, fix our climate, build a waste-free world, clean our air, and protect and restore nature. So all these are different categories, and these are the different organizations that have been nominated for awards. So I think there is definitely obviously a lot of support for William in this area. And so I'm sure it'll be a big event and generate some interest there. And we shall see where it goes in the future. But I think this is definitely William's real passion project. And I think it's a good one. And at the same time, though, again, the challenge for William here is that he has very, very large ideas, but he needs to make sure he doesn't lose the British people in the process, as not everybody may be as invested in this as he is. So that's kind of always going to be the line you have to walk, I think, as a monarch of any country. And we'll see some more here as well, but that's definitely going to be the big challenge, is I think, because not everybody is going to be as invested, and some people might think that William is more concerned about, let's say, the environment in Brazil than he is in what's happening in the UK. And again, we have some fairly good indication overall that monarchy support you could offer is somewhat waning across the continent. And so I feel like royals have to work even harder to justify their existence. And sometimes I wonder, are there new routes, let's say they're going down to try to generate that interest? Is that going to work, or will that fail? We may have to wait a couple of decades to see where that goes. But just an interesting thought, because I always wonder, because I read this book many years ago. It's called The Great Survivors, and it was about sort of the last remaining monarchs of Europe. So these are the great survivors, but will they survive is the big question, because yes, they survived. And that book was written in, I want to say, the 2010s, maybe even early 2000s. So it's definitely a book that reflected how things are changing. But of course, always questions of how effective will some things be? I'm not sure. So it is very exciting, though. I think William, of course, is very, very interested in seeing where the Earthshot Prize goes, and is excited to see it having an impact. But the world is sometimes more complicated than we think. And so I hope he doesn't get his hopes up too much at the same time, because he might be disappointed. So, anyways, let's go ahead and thank you so much, Carol, for the super chat. I really, really do appreciate it. But one of the more interesting stories here, and it's for Pippa. She will very, very much appreciate that. So next, let's move on to King Juan Carlos. And this is probably maybe where we'll spend most of our time. Hopefully we'll get to other stories, but this is a really, really, I'm just absolutely fascinated. So this is Spain's version of Spare, but this is the former king, not the second son of the king. So very, very different circumstances. And so if you're not, let's say, broadly aware of who King Juan Carlos is and sort of what happened, that is him right there with his wife when he took the throne in 1975. And previously, before then, for it wasn't even, I don't think, 40 years, there was a dictator who ruled Spain named Francisco Franco. And he kind of came out victorious after the Spanish Civil Wars. And I think I want to say the 1930s. And I'm not, let's say, historically all that fluent in this time period. But what I find really, really fascinating about this whole thing is how Juan Carlos has dealt with sort of his fall from grace and how this happened. And it's just important to know as well, Juan Carlos was very, very popular because he was the one who helped Spain transition to a monarchy after the death of Francisco Franco. And so because of that transition, he was much, much beloved. But he got caught up in a series of personal and financial scandals. So he had a ton of affairs, like a ton of affairs. And he also was really, really shady when it came to finances. So he was forced basically to abdicate in 2014. And since then, he's been sort of a thorn in the side of the now king, his son, King Felipe. He's also had a daughter. So this is Juan Carlos, whose husband spent time in prison for like tax evasion type things. And he is very much estranged from his wife, Queen Sofia. So he's very much had this huge fall from grace, which really started when he fell off fell during a safari, broke his hip, and he was there with his mistress, and Spain was going through a recession. And I was actually in Spain during the recession at one point. So it was sort of interesting. I was surprised how like run down aspects of Spain were. And so anyways, just very, very like he's such a contradictory figure. And so this has a good synopsis. This is from the Times of London. And so it's in regards to an interview he did with Le Figaro. So I wanted to get it, but I did have to subscribe, so I went with the Times because they kind of give a synopsis of it. I'd like to read it more. I actually have now accumulated quite a few foreign magazine subscriptions just so I can read royal articles. So this is going to be his book will be published next week in France, and it's published in France before to not overshadow the 50th anniversary of Francisco's death. So, if Juan Carlos was still king right now, he'd be celebrating his golden jubilee this year. That's just to be specific. And so he's come at this whole situation now because Francisco Franco, this is important to know as well, did not like Juan Carlos's father, because actually Juan Carlos's father should have been king, and Francisco instead left Spain to the son. So this caused obviously some additional family tensions as well. But Juan Carlos is sort of, let's say, I don't know if you want to say rewriting history or having sort of rose-colored glasses on history, because he said, "Why lie if he who made me king, and in fact did so to create a more open regime," because he describes the dictator as tender and benevolent. Now, there's something really interesting here that you could glean, especially as I would say a historian. What I find and what I enjoy is this process of understanding people from multiple different angles, because not everybody is the same, or sorry, not everybody is usually black and white. Horrible people can do nice things, nice people can do horrible things. So it's this idea of understanding the shades of gray of people can help us, I feel like, understand history better. But the question is this just a glossing over of the deaths Francisco Franco caused, or trying to portray a different side to him? That's sort of the question, because Spaniards have basically been taught Francisco Franco was comparable to Mussolini or Hitler. So imagine, your former king going, well, Hitler was great. Didn't you know that? That wouldn't go over too well. So let's go ahead and take a look here at some of the quotes. So according to Spanish media, the royal household considers the book unhelpful to the monarchy. So he says that in regards to Franco, he doesn't have bad memories. He said he had a clear vision of the Spanish state and its future. I mean, I would argue so do a lot of dictators. It's not necessarily a good thing. He did not hide his sympathy for me. He could even be somewhat tender and benevolent. I had greater respect for Franco. I appreciated his intelligence and his political acumen. I never allowed anyone to criticize him in front of me. Okay, so when it comes to dictators, yeah, they're pretty good at their political acumen because they get rid of the people who disagree with them. Like, that's not a difficult concept, because again, I feel like we're very much in this rewriting of history angle by Juan Carlos. And so as it goes on, he says he expressed amazement at the dictator's longevity and power. It's like, well, that's sort of what dictators do. Again, sorry. It's just like, does he not understand that's what they do? He said no one was able to overthrow him or even destabilize him, which over such a long period, 37 years, is quite a feat. I mean, it is and it isn't. Because if your goal is to kill everybody who disagrees with you can reign pretty issue free, to be honest. The former monarch also reminisces about being at Franco's deathbed. I was sitting next to him in his hospital bed. He said, he took my hand and said, as if with his last breath, "Your Highness, I ask only one thing of you: maintain the unity of the country." That was his last wish. So Carlos added, he did not ask me to preserve the regimes as it was or the principles of the national movement. I therefore had free hand to implement reforms as long as unity of Spain was not called into question. I gave the freedom back to the Spanish people. Franco died a few days later on November 20th, 1975. Juan Carlos left Spain in 2020 after corruption investigations into his financial affairs, which have since been shelved. I decided to leave as to not hinder the smooth running of the crown or disturb my son in the exercise of his duties as sovereign. So, I mean, again, the national movement, I don't know too much about this time period, but it is pretty astounding because Juan Carlos may have had potentially the opportunity to rule as a dictator himself. And he did do the good thing and give the control back to the people. And which is fantastic, but yeah, he also thinks that Franco is a great guy. And we have Madam Esther here who says, as a Spanish, I feel highly offended by how he recalls the whole thing. Both of my grandparents were highly affected by the dictatorship. I mean, that's so important to add. I need to learn more myself because I definitely want to do an exploration of this because Juan Carlos having all these sort of facets to him and how he ushered in a great era of Spain and yet it's looking back at a terrible era of Spain and sort of sugarcoating it is just a really, really fascinating perspective. And some people believe this was done at the sort of influence of people he's close to now in exile in Abu Dhabi. He says when he went into exile, he'd already boarded the plane that would take him to Abu Dhabi. It was probably a private jet, somebody arranged for him, and he received a call from his son. And his son said, "Where are you going, boss? To London?" Felipe asked. "As a sign of respect, my son calls me that, although in private, I'm still dad," explained the King Emeritus as he was officially styled. And then he says, "No, to Abu Dhabi." And then Felipe goes, "Take care." That was our last conversation before many months passed. Felipe's like, just leave, dad. Just go. I mean, it is kind of sad. Juan Carlos mentions his strained relationship with his son with sadness. "My son has turned his back on me out of a sense of duty. I understand that as king, he must maintain a firm public stance, but it hurt me and that he was so insensitive." I would argue Felipe wasn't insensitive. I mean, his father was. His father cheated on his mother all the time, like 2,500. I mean, that's been probably the crazy estimate. I mean, there have been estimates that he's basically been with thousands of women, Juan Carlos. And so, yeah, I'm not surprised that Felipe doesn't have a ton of respect for his dad. Would you? If that was your dad? Probably not. And it's not Felipe's job to coddle his father. He needs to honor his father, but it's not his job to coddle him or to, let's say, allow him to, let's say, deeply impact his life. And as well, keeping Juan Carlos too close would be bad. So you need to have a situation where an abdication occurs where the monarch that abdicates is completely and utterly willing to step back. And I would say this is probably a sexist assertion, but I don't apologize for it, that probably abdication in some ways works better with women than men. We've seen Marguerite and Beatrix be very willing to step back and, you know, very much in support of their sons ruling and not too engaged at all. But when it comes to men, I would say that's a little harder, although Albert, who abdicated in Belgium, had a lot of financial issues. But Juan Carlos would, if he was, let's say, overindulged, be very much an even bigger pain in the side of his son. So his son sort of has to keep his distance, I think, both for his own sanity and for the sake of the crown. And Juan Carlos is the one that forced Felipe to make that decision. And so he adds, "I can't hold back my emotions when I think about some of the members of the family whom I no longer have, and Spain, which I miss so much." Then why did you treat Spain so badly? Juan Carlos, you could have treated it a bit better. "I leave without prospects, without any certainty that I will ever be able to live in my country again." Well, that's because they were investigating you for financial corruption, which you caused. "Above all," he goes on to say, "I hope to have a peaceful retirement where I live, to resume a harmonious relationship with my son, and above all, to return to Spain, my home." So he has kind words for his estranged wife, former Queen Sofia, whom he bitterly regrets did not visit him in Abu Dhabi as his daughters, Princesses Elena and Christina, have. So this is sort of another facet of this relationship, which is that Elena and Christina, it's I believe Christina specifically, her husband is the one who went to prison for tax evasion and financial fraud, basically. And so Juan Carlos at that one point was announced that he was setting up some sort of trust to keep them sort of comfortable financially. And it's like, number one, they're in their 50s or 60s now. If you can't figure out how to like manage your finances by this point and support yourself, you're kind of a disaster. And so why they're going to him, and this has been rumored, I don't have any facts to back this up, but it's been rumored that Juan Carlos could be worth upwards of hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars, based on like the back end deals he did to enrich himself. So it's entirely possible they're just having a relationship with him just because they want the money. Their brother, as well, because of Christina's husband's situation, or ex-husband, I should say, wants to keep his distance from his sisters too. And so you have these very, very complex family dynamics here. And a man who is in his elderly years and not quite, I don't think, dealing with reality. So he also makes a statement about Queen Letizia, who he does not like. It said basically Felipe's wife, writing that he did not miss his daughter in law. Her incorporation into the royal family did not help the cohesion of our family relationships, he complained. There is a personal disagreement between him and her. I don't blame him for, I don't blame her for not liking him. I would not like him either if he was my father in law. I would not. Because you just got to wonder too, like, and I'm sure she's heard a lot of things from Felipe about the hurt his father has caused. In addition to that, she and her husband would have been still the prince and princess of Asturias at this point. Maybe he would have abdicated if his health got truly very bad, which I don't think he's in great health. But he might have abdicated maybe 5 years ago instead of 10 plus years ago. And so that forced them and their young family to become monarchs much earlier than they initially anticipated. And so that will cause friction as well. And I know there's a certain segment of people in Spain who do not like Letizia. And some of this comes from, I think, sort of old perspectives. They didn't like that she was divorced. I don't think they like that. You could say, I would argue she's probably more on the liberal end of the political spectrum. Like I think if she wasn't married to the king, she'd probably be a Republican, to be quite honest. And so I don't think they particularly like her because of that. And they wanted him to marry somebody of the aristocracy and some, I think, diminutive, let's say, quiet speck of a woman like Sophia was a bit. And so I think that's where some of that comes from. Like, not that she's perfect at all. I think, of course, she is one of the best working royals out there, to be quite honest, even though I don't think necessarily that she would, um, let's say, be interested in being royal if she was not married to her husband. She represents Spain very well. She's always very, very professional. And there have been some, of course, discussions of people thinking that Letizia doesn't treat Sophia well. But I wouldn't be surprised either, again, if there is some aspects to the family dynamic. There's sort of a famous video as the family's coming out of a church after Easter or something to that effect. And Sophia's grabbing the girls and forcing them into pictures with her. And Letizia kind of breaks that up. And people are like, oh, Letitia's being so mean. Because Sophia, because of how Juan Carlos treated her, is sort of seen by a lot of people as a saint. And so, like, Sophia can't do anything wrong, but Letizia does everything wrong. I just don't believe that. And having watched the video myself, I like the girls were actually trying to get away from grandma. They were. And I think she kind of uses them, or at least did when they were younger. I don't think that's as much the case now, to kind of like still ingratiate herself into the royal fold. This would be Queen Sophia. And I don't think treats Letizia with very much respect. So that is sort of, again, my aspect on it. And as Melissa said too, and there could be further dynamics behind the scenes we don't know about too. Exactly. Like, there could be just some natural tensions between different generations type of thing and everything. So it's just really what royals is so interesting about royals is that you have this complex family dynamic even within this working royal system. So it's all like, so you have a brand and an industry, you could say, but then it's all run by family. And then you have these complex family dynamics within as well. And all that kind of streams together into sometimes a big mess. Let's just say it's a big mess. And so it goes on to say that he wrote the book to exorcise our demons, which are returning, apparently referring to Spain's political divisions and the erosion of the post-Franco consensus that underpinned Spain's democratic transition. One of the most striking parts of the interview concerns the attempted coup in February 23 of 1981, when armed Guardia Civil led by Lieutenant Colonel Antonio Tejero stormed Parliament. Juan Carlos claims the episode was not a single plot, but three coups at once: Tejero's coup, General Alfonso Armada's coup, and that of the politicians close to Francoism. So, again, he dealt with a lot and dealt with it, you could say, fairly well, but his legacy is going to be destroyed by his own actions. He accuses his former personal secretary and trusted aide Armana of betraying him. He says, "I loved him dearly, but he betrayed me." He told the novelist Javier Cercas, who has written about the coup, "How can you believe I was involved?" Insisting his role was to defend democracy, not conspire against it. And then he talks about that though he had all powers, the power to pardon or confirm a death sentence, he never used it. If I said no, the generals would have overthrown me. So again, he's talking about a very, very, you could say, difficult time in the history of Spain. And he helped the country navigate it. I understand why there is this reverence to him in a lot of ways. He also talks about his former mistress. This relationship was a mistake he bitterly regrets because the fall from grace began again when he busted his hip elephant hunting in Botswana during an economic crisis. Because what you don't want to do as king is head out and go on a safari with your mistress and then break your hip. And so it was detrimental impact on my kingdom and family life. So he lost the throne just 2 years later and damaged my reputation in the eyes of the Spanish people, triggering a manhunt in which I turned out to be easy prey. Yeah, because you made a series of bad decisions. So he adds, "I had to show the Spanish people that I was aware of the seriousness of the situation. And when he left the hospital in Madrid, he said, 'I'm very sorry. I was wrong and it will not happen again.'" And so his memoir, he said, is meant to serve as a defense against attacks against him, an act of reconciliation, and as a reminder, democracy did not fall from the sky, he said. "I hesitated to write this book, but little by little, I realized that my friends, children, and grandchildren had no idea who Franco was or about the democratic transition that followed." Now, I do want to hold out this point again and reiterate something I mentioned at the beginning. I don't think it's bad necessarily to show that people, even horrible people, had multiple facets to them. Because one of the lessons I think we can all learn basically everywhere all the time is that we tend to want to, let's say, seek out, let's say, like sins in others without realizing that we're sinning ourselves. So there is this aspect where I think it's good to show that both good and bad people are human. And so that there's multifacets to everyone. Not everyone is completely good, not everyone is completely bad. Everybody is shades of gray. I think that's a good lesson for kids to learn. But what I also see here is an aspect of where he's trying to gloss over and sort of really making Francisco Franco out to be, let's say, much nicer. He says more benevolent to him. And maybe Franco was benevolent to Juan Carlos, but he wasn't benevolent to everyone. And I think a good memoir would have really been able to look at all sides of this and present a very interesting picture, because it would actually be really interesting for somebody who knew him and Francisco Franco as intimately as I think Juan Carlos did, to show these facets and really go through and show the horrible things Francisco Franco did and this other side of him too, because that creates a more nuanced picture. And I think we can all recognize that oftentimes that's actually a good thing to have. But he's not doing that. That's not what he's doing. And I think that's why this book could have been, I think, immensely, immensely done immense amount of good in Spain. And now I think it'll just be a mess. So to end it, he says he left Spain to help my son, seeking a place where journalists from my country could not easily find me and ask me questions. Again, a lot of people who are really arrogant and self-centered and everything don't want anyone to ask a decent question. We see this a lot with Harry and Meghan. They take interviews where nobody asks them a decent question, and it's obnoxious. So, in one passage, he refers also to Diana, Princess of Wales, with whom he denies any romantic involvement, describing her as cold, taciturn, distant, except in the presence of the paparazzi. So, I thought that was an interesting tidbit as well to sort of mention here. And I think we have a little bit more from a different publication. So if you're not aware, this is sort of a like, why even mention Diana? I'm sure some people are thinking that in the chat right now. So between 1986 and 1988, Prince Charles, Princess Diana, and William and Harry spent considerable time with the Spanish royal family. Every summer, they spent a few days at the Marvent Palace, the summer residence of Juan Carlos and Sofia of Spain in the Palma de Mallorca. Along with other members of European royals, families. It's kind of sad that they don't all vacation together anymore, to be quite honest. Juan Carlos and Diana were often photographed on the royal yacht Fortuna enjoying the Spanish summer. This was enough to spark rumors, especially given that Prince Charles's affair with Camilla Parker Bowles was the talk of the town. Princess Diana had already clarified the situation herself. I felt uncomfortable being left alone with him in a room, although I can assure you nothing happened, she told friends after her visit to Majorca. She also reportedly described him at the time as a very lecherous man, a princess clearly far from charmed. So I just thought that would be kind of some additional context maybe that you might find interesting. And then another little tidbit here to sort of wrap up. He mentions that the transition to democracy in his book, but also discussed the 1981 coup and Spain's geographical disputes. So Spain is not quite like France, and I think, and Germany in some ways, is that they had little kingdoms, but they are not, let's say, a cohesive country in some ways. And actually, most of Europe is not. You have to remember, a lot of these countries are little kingdoms put together. That's the case in Italy and Germany, especially. There's aspects of that in Spain, or sorry, France, although France became much more united in like the high Middle Ages, basically. But at one point, it was made up of a series of kingdoms too, which is why you have Princess or Queen Eleanor of Aquitaine. Aquitaine was a hugely powerful province within France, and the king of France basically just had Paris. So as people died and as some of those territories got kind of pulled into the mainstay of France, that did change. Spain, I'm just not quite as sure about, to be quite honest. So I think this pretty much goes over what we said, but I thought this was interesting too. We are fragile because we haven't been a constitutional monarchy for very long. And that's true. Like, we're looking at 50 years here. That's still quite a young democracy in Spain. And if you think about it, Europe overall, a lot of the countries, again, Italy and Germany in particular, are actually very, very young countries. A united Germany and Italy is a very new thing. It's only 150 years old. I'm spitballing. I can't remember exactly, but I think both of them are less than 200 years old. So that's something to keep in mind. And says, in regarding to the ascension after Franco's decision, the former monarch muses, why lie if Franco is the person who made me king? In reality, he made me king to create a more open regime. So I just found that quote very self-centered. So he made me king. He made me king. Like, he says that twice. So that's just, again, something to keep in mind. He said, for 2 years, I had absolute power. The power to pardon or overturn the death penalty. I didn't have to do it, thank God, because at the time, if I said no, the generals would have overthrown me. Again, we had heard about that before, but I do like that additional context of like he had absolute power for a period of time. And even though he gave that up, I would imagine that he still had that sense in his mind that I am king, kind of thing. I have the power and this and that and whatever. And so I just think that's something just, again, interesting to keep in mind. Again, explain some of how we got to this situation, in particular with Juan Carlos. So that's just a facet to consider. So I am looking, you can actually order the book in Spanish. I do not speak or read Spanish. No, but I do plan on actually getting this book. I'm hoping it's translated into English because I am really fascinated in this time period and how all the monarchies became what we recognize today. But obviously there's a lot of like disparate sources of information, and sometimes the best stuff is in the original language. Thankfully, with like Google Translate and everything, a lot of that's much easier to decipher anymore. Like it's amazing the leaps and bounds we've had, especially that I actually saw a historian mentioning this on X, that translators and actually historians are the two things that are two careers at most risk from AI. which is a bit scary because one of the things, and this is so important when you're thinking about somebody like Francisco Franco or Kim Jong Un or Vladimir Putin or whatever, that AI is, and even in our country, in certain, let's say, people and factions, AI is a very convenient tool to rewrite history in real time. And that's why I think it's really important to go back to books to really try to make sure we read the original source material and all these sorts of things. Like the technology, as Melissa says, Google Translate saved our butts when we had to go to the hospital in Mexico 150%. The technology is amazing. But with advances of technology, always come the risk that somebody will use it in nefarious purposes. And I just always think that's something to keep in mind, because I was really sad to hear that historians are most at risk. Because I'm like, I'm a historian. I don't want to be at risk technically of being superseded, I guess, by technology, but that is a risk. But this is a really, really, again, something I want to dig into much, much more, because this is not only covering, let's say, Juan Carlos's reign, but you have to look at Franco, the Spanish Civil War, all these sorts of things, which I'm just not super familiar with. And I know some of the history, like how the family had to sell some of their tiaras and things in order to, let's say, make money, and they have been able to purchase some of those pieces back. Although it was really interesting is that you like one of the pieces that they tried to buy back that they couldn't was eventually, I think, purchased by Elizabeth Taylor, sort of a famous necklace. And so I think Spain, with Felipe and Letizia, who I think are two of the hardest working royals out there, they've raised their daughters to be like they've always been at big events. This is different compared to a lot of other royal families. The Spanish girls have been very, very involved in royal engagements and these sorts of things. And Leonor is going through military school so that she is able to be head of the Spanish armed forces. I think Spain is actually, I would argue, one of the stronger monarchies, to be quite honest. And one of the things we won't go over, but we did see last week, is that Letizia and Felipe, it's been a year since the Dana flooding, which happened in Spain last year. If you remember it, it's like in the region of Valencia. They call it Dana, Dana, and it's like all capitals. I can't quite remember what it stands for, but there was this huge flooding thing, and Felipe and Letizia went there with the Spanish president, and he was not well liked, and things were thrown at them. And they had one bodyguard who had blood running down his face. They were covered in mud because people were throwing things more at the president than them. But Felipe, I think, especially because he's 6'5", he has such a commanding presence just simply for his height, that he and Letizia, despite, kind of like a very chaotic and antagonistic crowd, were going through and talking with people and hearing from people and these sorts of things. And that was a great test, which I think both of them passed with absolute flying colors. Letizia and Felipe totally and completely passed that test of royals acting under pressure and really, really showing and thriving in that moment. And so for me, I think that's unbelievably a good, I mean, that should be an example to all royals of what to do when the crowd turns quite antagonistic and violent. And the people just wanted to be heard, and that's exactly what the royals did. The Felipe would go, calm down, speak to me. I want to hear from you, but I can't hear from you if you're all yelling at me. Let's calm down. And he did it brilliantly, and so did she. And so I think they have a lot of stability, but Juan Carlos will always be that thorn in their side until he passes away. So I look forward, though, to getting a copy of this and maybe finding out a bit more. But let's move on to just something quick real here about Andrew. Obviously, we did a whole video on Royal News Network about Andrew being stripped of basically everything. There's two little tidbits that we can just catch up on with this sort of all this Andrew news. And so one of the things is Donald Trump has shared his thoughts. He said it's a terrible thing that's happened to the royal family. That's been a tragic situation. It's too bad. I feel badly for the family. And I thought that was sort of a kind of a nice thing, obviously, because he had just been to a state visit in the UK. He has a lot of connections there. So that was the president of the United States weighing in. We also have here Andrew potentially being stripped of his rank and Falklands medal. Now this feels just a little petty at this point. And so it says on Sunday, the defense secretary confirmed that Andrew would be stripped of his honorary rank of vice admiral, his last remaining honorary military title. He said that his department was working to remove the rank, which was awarded on his 55th birthday, and that they are not ruling out stripping him of his campaign medal from the Falklands conflict. I will just say, like, my personal opinion is Andrew served in the war and served, as far as I'm aware, pretty well. I don't think there is a need to strip him of that medal. I think that's just kind of going down the cruelty route. That's just being a little cruel. Christina, we gifted one Royal News Network membership. Why, thank you so much, Christina. And we do have a little bit of, let's say, exciting news here. And I think I made the screen a bit too big because let's look at a very exciting thing. We have a tiara from Queen Letizia. I'll have to look it up, guys, and see which one it is because I know what the look of it is, but I can't think of the name off the top of my head. But there they are. Oh, the gorgeous pearl one there from the family. And Letizia's in a dress. I believe she wore it for the Dutch state visit back there last year. And they look absolutely lovely. This, again, is for the Oman state visit. And one of the things I love that the Spanish royals do is that, okay, I totally lost my train of thought there. You'll have to excuse me. I don't know what I was thinking of saying. So anyway, so they look, I love that they cover their own royal engagements with video. I think that's absolutely fabulous of them to do. I think it's a great way to sort of get the attention on them. And there's like a cute little moment between them. I don't know why people say that they think that they're on the brink of divorce or something. Like, that's just no. They share cute little moments, like natural moments and stuff. I think they're adorable. I think they're adorable. And she might be actually wearing some, well, no, I think the tiara helps. Because again, he's really, really tall. She's actually fairly tall too. She just looks like teeny compared to him. Carol, thank you so much for the super chat saying here, I disagree stripping him of his military medals. Me too. If he honorably earned them in combat, I don't like to strip them at this point just seems, again, unnecessarily cruel. Like, it just seems really, really cruel. And like, you're just trying to be mean just for the sake of being mean, And so Andrew has lost everything. And he served, he piloted his helicopter and did runs and everything. And he did all those things. And I don't understand why you would need to strip him of something he did. Like, he wasn't dishonorably discharged. Like, I just don't quite get it. So I agree, Carol. And I think I see most of us saying, yeah, like, that's going too far to strip him of his military medals he honorably earned. You earned it. Let's just move on. So next we are moving on as well to Princess Ingrid Alexandra. So this is her right here. She's the future Queen of Norway, and she has sort of a really, really tough family thing. Of course, we have been following the case of Marius Borg-Holmby, who is her half brother. So they share the same mother, not the same father, though. Her father is going to be the future king of Norway. And so, sorry, I was trying to get that little bit of text off her face. So because of that, the family has quite struggled in the last several months. And so she has absconded to Australia for school. Now she says, which I'm sure is somewhat true, but that she, just wanted to experience a different culture, which I think is actually good for royals to do. A lot of the Scandinavian royals and a lot of the European royals do actually study abroad at some point. And I think that's good because you need to be exposed to, I think, different things as a royal. Princess Elizabeth of Belgium studies here in the United States at Harvard. She's getting a public policy master's in public policy. And so I think that's that exposure, though I don't know how good exposure in some ways Harvard is a good thing. I think that's a good thing. So I'm not necessarily surprised, but that it's halfway across the world, not in the United States, because there's obviously been some visa issues and stuff like that even Elizabeth had to deal with, that she is there now in Australia, just as far away as humanly possible from her family, pretty much on the other side of the planet. And I think to avoid everything going on with her brother. So Carol said, could it be Queen Victoria Eugenie's Cartier pearl tiara. Yes, I think that's the tiara Letizia is wearing. So we'll have to do a little bit of a video on that for Royal Fashion News here, probably tomorrow, but you'll definitely get to it. So this is one of the bigger interviews I think she's done. And so she says, it's been difficult for me as a sister. Again, this is Google Translate, so it's not, and a lot of actually not all of our stories, but some of our stories have been, because that's the best way for me to get some of the additional aspects of royal family, or the royal families. So she says, life as a free student is well underway, but on the other side of the world, the family is facing several crises. In an interview with NRK, Princess Ingrid Alexandra now comments on the situation surrounding her brother Marius for the first time. So and they go through some cool things here. So she introduces herself simply as Ingrid and adds Alexandra if she has to provide a last name. So if you meet her, she'll say, my name is Ingrid, which is good to know, because I was wondering, because Princess Catherine Amalia actually goes by Amalia most of the time. So she doesn't really go by Katharina. And I was curious about Ingrid. So apparently she prefers Ingrid. So the desire to live as a normal student as possible in their new hometown of Sydney, of her. So again, some of the Google Translate stuff will kind of be gender neutral or stuff, or the wrong gender when it's referring to particular things. It says, in the hallways of the university campus, few people recognize her, which is also why royals go abroad. It's like, well, I don't have to be with people who know exactly like everything going on in my family. So she says, I feel free as a student. I definitely feel that I can be myself. So foreign outlets oftentimes use these like hyphens. It's not an official hyphen, but the dash to denote quotes, in case you're curious. There's been some press here. I've been incredibly lucky to have been so sheltered in Norway and by the Norwegian press for so many years. I've experienced some paparazzi here. There have been some situations that may seem a little uncomfortable, but fortunately, it has calmed down a lot over time. So she's a full-time student and a full-time princess, even when she's as far away from the kingdom as you can get. So yes, there she is. So she's obviously, there's exams, and they're interviewing in this massive like empty room, which they say it looks like the Hogwarts, like Harry Potter type hall. It's McLaurin Hall, which is almost empty for this interview. I'd be curious how many people on the campus know that there's a princess there and that she was doing this big interview in this like massive empty hall. And so she talks about a couple of things here, and right choice for the school. I'm enjoying it very much so far, so I'm glad I'm starting here. Was it a conscious choice to move so far away from home to study? She says, I think there was many good universities I could have chosen, and I think Sydney was the right choice for me. They have an incredibly good university with good teachers and a nice student environment. She says, emphasizing the international environment of the campus. So she's at the University of Sydney, and there are people from 140 different countries there. So these are just some pictures that NRK got while they were on campus. And then you're get an outside perspective on Norway as well, and that is very exciting. But there was also a point moving far away from Norway. She says, I think it helps to have an international perspective, but it wasn't Sydney was far away from home in and of itself. So I think that's important. But yeah, I think that's true. I think royals do need, especially a country as small as Norway. I mean, I'm sure she travels quite a lot, but I think it's really, really good for her and any royal, especially in a small country, to have outside experiences, because you will be dealing with a lot of people from a lot of different countries. And so the more you can learn, the better off things will be. So this is, of course, the big question is about Marius. So it says, how is it for the princess, the situation your brother Marius is in now? Of course, it's difficult, she said, both for those of us who are around, for me as a sister, and for mom and dad, and of course, for everyone affected by the case. What is it like to be far away in that situation? Yes, it is ... I don't know if I want to go in too much more than that. She interrupts herself. So she's definitely is kind of doesn't want to get too far into it. So we can actually hear her actually, I think, answering the question bit here. So let's go ahead and take a little bit of a listen.
Hvordan det for prinsessa, den situasjonen broren din, Marius, I akkurat nå?
Nei, det jo også selvfølgelig vanskelig. Både for oss som står rundt, for meg som søster og for mamma og pappa, og selvfølgelig for alle de berørte I saken.
So she doesn't give much, but that's, I would suspect, is about as good as you're going to get. And that's pretty that's not too bad. She also talks about her mom who has chronic pulmonary fibrosis, and she says it's difficult. Mom has a chronic illness for a long time, but I tried to keep in good contact with her. We talked often on the phone. And I think she wants to treat me to being a student and being here to study. I know that, but of course it's hard to be far away. And I'm proud of my mother who has been incredibly strong and will stand up now. So I just thought that was it's nice. I think she's talking about her mom here a little bit.
Modige på lungerehabiliteringsopphold nå I denne måneden her. Hvordan det for prinsessa å være langt unna når mor ikke frisk?
So it's like somewhat is like challenging because her mom has this chronic illness, but there's also been a lot of talk about things that her mom uses it to avoid things. So
Det jo selvfølgelig vanskelig. Mamma har hatt en kronisk sykdom I lang tid. Men jeg prøver jo å holde god kontakt med henne, da, at vi snakker ofte på telefonen. Og så tror jeg jo at hun
So that was interesting. And then there's this cute little section here, which I enjoyed, where she kind of goes over, like they ask her short questions. I thought how they kind of ended it by going always, thank you for answering. I thought I was like, is this like a Norwegian thing? I thought it was kind of funny. So let's listen to a little bit of this here.
Hva presenterer prinsessa seg som her I Sydney? Fornavn og etternavn.
Jeg presenterer meg vanligvis bare med fornavn. Og så hvis jeg må si etternavn, så sier jeg Alexandra.
Hva studietips har prinsessa
I thought that was a funny question. What study tips do you have?
for å takle innlevering og eksamenspress?
Jeg tror det noe med det å ta ting litt steg for steg. Jeg har ikke kommet opp noe veldig revolusjonerende. Hvis jeg gjør det, så skal jeg si fra.
Takk for det.
She's like, I haven't found anything revolutionary. If I do, I'll let you know. I thought that was a pretty good answer because it's like, what are you supposed to say? Like, there is no real trick to it. You just study, like, and figure out what works to you. And I love that the interviewer keeps going, thanks for that.
Muntlig eller skriftlig eksamen? Hva best?
Jeg tror muntlig eksamen for min del.
I thought that was really interesting. She said oral exam. We don't really do oral exams here much in the States.
Hva best? Surfing I Australia eller ski I Norge?
Tror nok kanskje jeg må si ski I Norge, altså.
So she prefers skiing in Norway to surfing in Australia.
Takk for det.
And she does also surf in Norway, in case you're wondering.
Hvem savner prinsessa mest hjemme?
Og det hunden min Molly.
Hvem ringer prinsessa når hun har en dårlig dag?
Det nok mamma.
So I thought that was a sweet answer. She misses her dog, and if she has a bad day, she calls her mom.
Og hvordan holder prinsessa kontakt med bestemor og bestefar?
Bestemor veldig flink til å sende lange meldinger på vegne av både henne og bestefar. Da forklarer hun hva de har drevet med, sender litt bilder, så vi holder absolutt god kontakt.
I love her little smile here talking about her grandparents. I love that you can feel the love a bit from her there. And so, yeah, I just really, really thought that was sweet.
Og bestefar?
Han også med på å sende, men han ikke så like på å skrive lange meldinger, da.
Han ikke så digital.
Nei, ikke så digital.
So apparently grandpa's not good with the phone. I kind of love that answer. Yeah, he's okay, but he ain't great with using the telephone. And I just think that's really, really funny. So she says, I believe the education will be relevant to the job I will be doing because the interesting thing is most of us go to college to find our careers. She is going to college knowing what her career will be and that she doesn't really have a choice in it. So it's very much a different perspective. So the exams will come up soon. Nerves, well, both. You can only hope you've prepared well throughout the year. There she is in the hall where they did the interview. And let's see if there'll be anything. Yeah, because this is a quote I was kind of referencing. The choice of education was open, but the job was determined. She was born to be the Queen of Norway. That's just got to be a weird kind of thing. Definitely think my education will be very relevant to the job I do in the future. I think it's important to have basic understanding of the political system of international relations and how things work. And you learn an incredible amount just from being in conversations, having good discussions where you even disagree. I think that'll be very important for me in the future as well. Yes, because you need to be able to agree to disagree and that people will disagree. And that's fine. That's actually healthy. That's even here on my channel, like everybody will agree, but I like I would at least always offer, hey, hear me out. If you still don't agree, that's totally fine. And we can move on, probably agree on something else in the future. Is the princess teaching about the monarchy here? Ooh, interesting. We haven't learned much about monarchy. It has been brought up a few times as a form of government that we compare to other forms of government, but we haven't had many conversations that have been for or against the monarchy. Can the princess join in discussions here, be engaged, and have an opinion? I think definitely so. An incredible number of discussions we have are very academically based. You should be able to use theories we learn about to analyze things that are happening in the world. It's very exciting, and to be able to see different sides makes a lot of sense to me personally too. So we won't go through all of it, but it's just kind of, I think, a really interesting little tidbit here. And they had to go and do this whole, I guess it's spring there, go and do this whole tour, get some pictures of her. I always thought it would just be so weird to have to do all these kind of things as a royal. I just thought that would just be strange. And so she will hope she can do a little work when she gets home. So just thought that was just an interesting piece to share if you hadn't seen it yet. So Ingrid Alexandra definitely does, like, I think she gives in a good interview there, and she definitely has some, let's say, complicated family dynamics there to kind of consider. And so we usually go for about an hour, I feel like, but I did want to include something else here real quick because I always think polls are interesting. You don't live or die by the poll, but polls are a good educational tool to sort of gauge where things are going. I think, and I've made this video before on the Crown Report actually, but for me, I feel like when it comes to the Brits, polling about every month or every quarter is just way too much because royals are very different than politicians, is that they're not enacting policy really. What they're doing is sort of being the kind of glue that holds everything together. They're always playing the long game, and doing constant polling is more of a political thing, and I dislike it. But there was an interesting poll that came out recently about, I guess, the Swedish royals. And this is from Trond Noren Isaacson. He is actually a Norwegian royal kind of commentator. So if you're interested in following him, this is on Instagram. So you can kind of see his handle up there if you're ever like, and he wrote a book, and you can see actually Ingrid is on the cover. And he talks about actually the gems within the family. I need to message him really badly because I want a copy of that book. I'll be like, I will pay you whatever you want. If you can ship it for me, I will send you the money. But he shared that last weekend, the broadsheet Dagens Nyheter published an opinion poll about the Swedish monarchy conducted by the pollster Ipsos. It found that 66% wish to retain the monarchy and 20% would like to abolish it. By comparison, in 2023, 62% were in favor of the monarchy, while 25% preferred a republic. So the strength for the monarchy is growing a little bit. However, seen in a longer perspective, support for the monarchy has fallen significantly since 2005, when 88% supported it and 16% wished to abolish it. And then the poll also found that 42% want King Carl Gustaf, who will be 80 in April, to abdicate in favor of Crown Princess Victoria, while 38% would like him to remain on the throne. This is virtually unchanged from 2023, when the numbers were 43% versus 38%. So I found that to be sort of interesting on multiple levels, because I think there could be definitely a huge conversation around, and I should do a whole video about it. I'll write it down and list the things I need to do. Abdication. Because one of the things that sort of happened with the longevity, like obviously people live a long time anymore, or can live a long time generally, with the advents of technology that we have. And it wasn't the case, and that really hasn't been the case for the vast majority of the time monarchies have been in existence. They usually changed hands, could be even less than a year, or every couple of years, or let's say every 5 to 10, 20 years, you would get a new monarch. And while I don't think we should go back to so quick a turnaround, I think there's an interesting, really, really interesting question, and let's say avenues to discuss about how having a monarch on the throne for a long time could actually be rather detrimental to the monarchy, because you're not getting change, you're not getting a refresh. They're becoming really, really old, not able to do quite as much. I think there's actually a really awesome conversation that could be had about the reasons why in a modern era the best way to maintain a monarchy is through abdication, giving that monarchy a little bit of a reset button. Yes, the former monarch is there and they still love, and they're still beloved by the people. But I can also see, especially with the British monarchy, how the length of Queen Elizabeth's reign was a wonderful thing in many ways, but I think also left the Brits in a difficult situation. And they're really struggling to, I think, right the ship, because they in reverence for Queen Elizabeth, they didn't make probably the changes they needed to make as quickly as they needed to make them, because she was queen and she liked things a particular way and they followed her directives. And that has been beneficial to the monarchy. And I also think not so beneficial to the monarchy as well. So I really think that is a conversation I want to have, because what I've seen when it comes to monarchies is that abdication leads to a refresh. It seems to just, especially with, I would say, Denmark and the Netherlands and Belgium, it breathes new life into the monarchy to have somebody who's just younger there. And that might seem to be, it's not that the older king or queen has not done a fantastic job, they have, but it's that necessary refresh and the ability to do a lot more that I think is in some ways more beneficial than having somebody stay on as long as their life continues. So that's, again, a conversation, a larger conversation for a different time, but those are some of the major news pieces, guys. And again, very very excited to say here that I have a whole if you haven't subscribed to it yet, this is it's totally in the editing process. So it'll probably be tomorrow morning, since we're getting kind of trying to stick to more of a consistent, let's say, kind of more regular business hours type of thing. But just to give you guys a tease. Oh, and Sir David Beckham. Oh gosh, this is why I do that. So this is the draft of the Crown Report. We have all the little tidbits from all the major royal families here, so that we didn't get to the UK, Belgium, Denmark, the Netherlands, Monaco, Norway, Spain, and Sweden. So I may be missing somebody, but there's a lot of pieces of news that you might not have heard about yet. And since, of course, it's so good to do those kind of things, because then I remember, oh yes, David Beckham is now Sir David Beckham, y'all. Let's give a big round of applause for David Beckham, who has become an official knight. And we do also have now Lady Victoria Beckham. So let's look it up here, because we should have it on the Royal Family channel. If not, we can find it from the Royal Family itself. Yeah, they don't actually have it. So let's go ahead and find the video here of David Beckham. Let's see if it's on this channel or not. Yes, okay. So we're going to go to the official Royal Family YouTube account. Again, I apologize for forgetting this. This is why the Crown Report is so great when I have everything written out, because then I don't forget everything. But we have Arise Sir Beckham. So let's go ahead and take a watch.
The honour of knighthood, Sir David Beckham, for services to sport and to charity.
Oh, there are the Beckhams walking out. I just did pause the music, guys, just because the music could get a copyright strike. So I did just take that out, and we can't really hear them talking anyways. But let me go ahead, guys, and find, I'm pretty sure I reposted a video of David talking about the award that he got. And sadly, of course, David is experiencing a similar, you could say, estrangement from family, like a son like King Charles is, because his son, Brooklyn, was not there. So let's go ahead, though, and listen to David share about this great experience.
And possibly for a few months after it as well. But, this week has been really emotional because, being back in London and obviously on the lead up to this day, it's been not stressful. I've not been nervous.
So I just, again, had to pause it a little bit there for copyright reasons, but he's just giddy. There's especially a picture I found where he's just giddy. He's just so happy.
Been emotional. No, I get that from my mum. I think it's because of the journey. I think it's because, it's such a big moment for our family.
And he has really, I think, tried very, very hard to achieve this for the family, doing so much. And I think it's just a love as well for the monarchy. Some people, I've seen some people call it, like when I was reposting and talking about some of this online, I would see some people call it brown nosing. Well, it's like, who cares? He loves the monarchy and he wants to support it. And yeah, you get things for doing that, but that's why sometimes people do things, right? But I think he also loves it. And I love how Victoria is posing herself right there with one foot in front of the other. Like, it's very much a pose.
And it's so special. I'm not insisting if they would like to call me Sir Dad or Sir Son, they can. But no, it's going to take some getting used to, people saying it. But no, it's just a huge honor.
I don't think it'll take too long for people to start saying it. So
it's a huge honor to be here at Windsor Castle. It's a huge honor to receive this from His Majesty the King, and it's just it's all round a very special day for us. I'm very, very proud to have had such a special honor given to me.
And it's really cool. They have decided to do so many of these honors within the grounds of Windsor in a more, let's say, like smaller environment, more intimate environment, rather than they kind of used to do it in a mass room at Buckingham Palace, so that you could have this sort of more intimate experience.
I grew up in a very humble background in the East End of London, always wanting to be a professional footballer, and then I'm stood here at Windsor Castle.
Aw. That's just such a positive little note to end on, guys. But that is sort of it for the rest of the Crown Report. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to put them in. And I did see one comment up here that I'll try to find. Oh, we have Joni, who says, went to London a couple months ago, got some great hot chocolate and tea from Whittard's. What a cute little store close to Buckingham Palace. Yes, it is. I love the Whittard of Chelsea. I go there every time I'm in London, and it's one of my favorite places to get hot chocolate. And so we have Carol, who gifted one Royal News Network membership. Why, thank you so much, Carol. I really do appreciate it. I'm sure somebody else does as well. Diz fan gave a super chat. Congratulations to Sir and Lady Beckham. Yes. And maybe she will get one of her own honors someday as well. That would be quite cool. Be cool for her to get, let's say, a royal warrant. That would be sort of awesome. So Gretchen says, I wonder if dishes are breaking in California after Sir David Beckham. I don't know, but it would be funny to know. But it's a great reminder of, like, people like the pomp and ceremony of the monarchy. It's cool. It's fun. Yes, it's not all it does, but David Beckham, who's internationally famous, in some ways you can offer us, especially in certain periods of time, maybe even more famous than members of the royal family for sure. And he's like giddy and like in awe of the monarchy. And that's the thing I think Meghan Markle just didn't quite understand, is that when it comes to the monarchy, there really is nothing else, because when it comes to celebrity, anybody can be a celebrity, especially anymore with influencers and stuff like that. Anyone can be a celebrity. I've been like noticed in public. It's sort of odd, because you like weirdly feel famous as like famous and all. Vast majority of the time nobody knows who I am. But it's one of those things where it's a super unique thing that you can't get. You can be a celebrity, you can be an actor, a singer, an influencer, what have you, but to be royal, you can only be born into it or marry into it. Those are the only two ways, which makes it really, really unique. Carol said Victoria got one in 2017 for her efforts in fashion. It was done by Queen Elizabeth. Dame Victoria Beckham. Oh, that would be cool. That'd be cool if they each had their own titles. That would be fun. Shah says, "Oh, wait until the titles are taken away from Harry and Meghan, and David will be higher than Harry, and Victoria will be higher than Meghan." That would be funny. That would be funny. KB says, "Meghan is seething about Victoria's elevated position. That's what she gets for treating them terribly because of envy." Yeah. TM says, "Finally, good news. Yes, some great news to end on." Gretchen says, "Royalty and celebrity together can do a lot. I remember when Prince William and Victoria Beckham raising money for air ambulances. Tom Cruise too." Yeah. Yeah. And we have, I saw you gave me the pronunciation and meant to bring it out and then I forgot. So you'll have to forgive me. But um, oh, metabolic, I'm sorry. I know. I'll look it up again. I saw the email. It says, she said, "It's so cool that people can get knighted for things other than killing people." That's a good one. That is a good one. Yes. Yes. It's like, and it's such a, like, it's like such an old thing in some ways that can be really, really fast. Like it's something that we can't even, you know, it harkens back to like the round table. Aw, says it's cool. Next time. Yes. I will get there. I have it in my email and I saw it. I was like, "Oh, I'll print it out and put it on a post-it," because I'm terrible at pronunciation, guys. You know, I want to learn another language, but really I don't even know English that well. So, in some ways. Oh man. Ah, I wish I was better for sure. But it's been a lovely, lovely, you could say, week here. And let's go ahead and take a look just for fun at, let's go over here to España and see Queen Letizia in that tiara. Oh, it's magnificent. Oh, and she's wearing the big earrings too. Oh man, is he looking at her butt? Oh man, that's funny. That's funny. Ritz says, "So excited for the Beckhams. Oops, Sir David and Lady Victoria. Nicely done. Yes. Nicely done." Lizzie B says 201,000 and you keep growing, Miss Brittany. Yeah. It's going well. Going well. And Lizzie B says, "Remember to hit subscribe and hit the like button for this crime report." Yeah. It's such a fun thing to do. I love exploring these other things. And I need to do them more in sort of bigger videos as well. It's just sometimes I forget to. Because sometimes you get so focused on one thing. It's like, oh, there were the others great stories, and I'm like missing out. So we definitely need to do a lot more exploring about Francisco Franco and Juan Carlos for sure. KB says, "Who would give up the experience of a state dinner like this? It looks magnificent." It does. It does. I don't know. But it's much better to hang out with the vegan crap menu at Emma Greed's place, apparently. P Pacific said, "Cousins, late Queen Elizabeth II chided." I can't pronounce today. Spain's former King Juan Carlos for relinquishing his throne, telling the disgraced monarch, "A king dies with his boots on," allegedly. I could see her saying that. But I totally get it. But at the same time, I think I honestly see, when I see monarchies, when they transition power, I honestly see a sort of rebirth of the monarchy in a lot of ways. We have Ritz who says, "Hi, Carol." Al says, "I think that hairstyle really suits her and it helps offset the huge tiara." I agree, because Letizia is so tiny and her face, kind of tiny and angular, that particular tiara can really overwhelm her frame. But actually, with the flowing hair, I think it actually does look much better. It balances out much more. Aram Scott says, "It's more difficult in live. Do you have bloopers?" I mean, I mispronounce things and stuff like that, but I guess I don't have as many bloopers as I do when I'm trying to do a video. But people don't always like the live format, so I like the idea of basically doing something in kind of getting things all put together. So it's kind of a trade-off, but it's nice too with a live, it's sort of one and done, although I am taking out segments and re-uploading them and those sorts of things to kind of increase the longevity of a live, and especially helpful over the weekend. So I can, because I used to do the lives on Saturday morning, and then it kind of can keep content going throughout the weekend. So if there's nothing really breaking or I'm busy or something like that, because I'm trying to, again, incorporate more work-life balance into my life, it gives me like, I don't have to focus so much on trying to, because actually filming and editing a video is much longer. So Debbie Keith said, hi, check out the Royal Rogues pick of the Prince of Wales. I almost thought you said Princess of Wales. But oh, I thought he actually got a selfie. No, never mind. Yeah, we are not talking about that because that's weird. Okay. Metaboli says, Brittany, I think you should get an A for your hard work. Oh, thank you. Or an A+. Why, thank you. I do appreciate that for sure. Aram Scout says she looks so regal. She does. I think she handles it very well. KB says, imagine the food alone, the best you will probably ever have in your life. I'd die for a seat at that table. It would just be awesome. It'd just be so awesome. I'm not gonna lie. Lizzie B says, Queen Letizia looks majestic. She does. Susan says, there is bad juju connected to the Godmother's bookshop, shady people around. I can see that. Leo Jackson says, my older brother told me if I ever get a title, he'll stop talking to me, and my dad say he'll be disappointed. Lynn Gideon says, I was hoping to see the knighting to happen the same day as one's Christmas show drops, so to overshadow it. Not that it would take much to overshadow it. Yeah, nobody cares about that show. And honestly, I need to do a whole video on this because I was thinking about this, but I truly believe Netflix is not invested in Harry and Meghan. There's zero way they're invested, because there's another show where I'm like, oh my gosh, they're doing the show isn't even dropping for another 5 months. And they're doing a ton of promo for it. And I'm like, it's not even here. It's going to be 5 months. What are you doing? Netflix, I think, is really, actually going to be pivoting. I like my personal belief is not that they'll stop doing everything, but I think Netflix is going to turn a lot to Asia for stuff anymore. That's sort of my assessment. K-pop Demon Hunter did so incredibly, insanely well. And Harry and Meghan just have no creative pull. Like, Netflix is not thinking in the slightest that As Ever is ever going to help it fill its coffers. It's going with Wednesday, One Piece, like Stranger Things. Those are the properties that it's leaning heavily on. And I think even more so, like One Piece right now, it's not leaning on Meghan Markle or, K-pop Demon Hunters, which I still think it was such a huge surprise that there's still actually not a bunch of merch out there for it, because they didn't even produce any. They had no idea it would be that successful. That's insane. But I don't think we have any announcements from Netflix on projects really, because there will be none. Beyond what we already know, I don't think there'll be any more collaborations between Netflix and Harry and Meghan unless it's a divorce or, let's say, a reality style series. Rich says, love that the royal blue on Letizia and that tiara. There's another rounded tiara she wears that overwhelms her because she's so tiny. Yes, that is the fleur-de-lis, and it does overwhelm her. That one has actually a similar stature, but I do think the hair, I think this is maybe one of the first times recently she's really worn the hair down with the big tiaras, and I think it really does help. I think it does help. And she wore this dress to her state visit in the Netherlands. Fritz says, I really like those loose locks this time. She looks stunning. She does. Gwen says, Queen Letizia is very polarizing in Spain. She's not well liked and her attitude is horrible. Like, I don't totally see that, because I just see her really just doing a great job. But I think there's a lot of various factors who don't like her for different reasons, not really, I don't think, always reflective of her actual work. Becky says, the members' unedited video was so great. Those bloopers, I loved it. Yeah, I was thinking actually about showing you guys another bloopers video I did last night, so you guys might see that too, because that was kind of funny. Lynn Gideon says, "Will you be ordering to provide a review of her junk?" No, I'm not. I haven't ordered any of it. Don't really plan to, and it's just not something I'm really all that interested in, to be honest. It's like why I bought the initial batch and why I had the wine, and I did actually order the second batch of rosé, which I kind of wish I had it now because now they're giving it out like, and we need to talk about the changes too. Instead of 3 bottles you're required to purchase, she's only making you purchase 1, and it's now $35. Like, that's expensive. I'm sorry. In this environment where things are getting more costly, I think coming out with sort of an expensive mid-tier brand is just not a good idea. But like the only way I can really say this is mid-tier and crop is because I actually have her mid-tier and crop stuff. Like, that's the only way I can actually say it. So I can base all future references off of past references. And until I get any indication that something, let's say, is quote unquote like groundbreaking, or there's this huge swell of like organic interest in a particular product she creates, and I can go, oh, yeah, I can see why people like this. And I can, then I might do something. Or if it's something really off the wall, I may, but at this point, I'm like, I'm done. Aram Scout said anime is popular and not so costly. Yes, like they made a killing off, is it Demon Slayer or something? They made a killing off that movie. It took them, I guess, like $20 to $30 million to produce. It's made 600. Like, that's insane. Actually, it might have been less than that to produce. And Hollywood is producing movies that cost $200 million to make and making $600 million, which means they probably didn't even break even. Like, there's just so much happening in this Hollywood space that's really fascinating for what it means for the future of the industry, and I think of Harry and Meghan within the industry as well, because I think the deal with Harry and Meghan is reflective of a dead model, and yeah, it's just really interesting thing to consider. Rit says, I cannot wait to see Princess Leonor in a gown and tiara. Maybe a long time though. I'm hoping we get to see her in one. We haven't yet. Alice says, tiara question, Brittany. How do you think wearing one affects the wearer's fashion choice? Do you start with the tiara and pair the dress with it, or pick the dress and then tiara to match? I think it depends on who you are. So if you are the queen, you can do whatever the heck you want. You get first choice of everything. So you can pair the dress with the tiara with the dress. Like, you can do either or. If you are lower down the line, I would imagine you figure out what tiara you'll have access to and then choose your fashion around that. Because let's say I'm working with a designer for a bright red dress, and I didn't realize I was going to get stuck with the emerald tiara. That would just look kind of like very too much Christmassy. So I think most of them, I would guess, know what tiara is going to be available to them. So I guess I'm adjusting. So I think most of the time they know what tiara is going to be available to them, and then they choose their outfit. Shaz says, I watched K-pop Demon Hunter with my eldest granddaughter, and it was fun. Yeah, just love the whole look. It is good. KB says, Netflix did 2 red carpet premieres in 2 countries for Victoria's 3-episode doc. Meghan had 2 seasons and they did nothing. They are not invested in her. The Christmas special feels like them recouping money. I agree. 100% agree. They are not invested at all in this. Metaboli says, I'd watch Meghan if she told ghost stories, if she did it well. That would be funny. Carol says, love the waves and the curls. It works. Yeah. Marcel says, yes, K-pop Demon Hunters is very popular. When I was in Tokyo, Japan 4 weeks ago, I saw huge posters. Yeah, it's like still, I want to say right now, it's still like in the top 10 of Netflix. I don't know if it's left the top 10 since it debuted. And that's how you get also as well a natural organic response. Like the entire reaction to K-pop Demon Hunter has been entirely organic. And organic means so much more than artificial, because the hype for Meghan was both artificial and organic, because the hype for Meghan was around her tantrum over Mindy Kaling saying Meghan Markle. That, I think, was the organic reaction, and they kind of hyped it into an inorganic, oh, the whole thing was popular. No. Everybody just wanted to watch that moment. And other people who did watch the whole thing, nobody cared. It says bloopers are the best. Please bring them on. Lizzie B says $64 for a candle. Surely Miss Brittany could use that to get to get Miss Pippa more treats. Yes, I could. And Carol says you could get a great rosé for $15 to $25. And honestly, as well, guys, I have an idea. So we'll have to put a kibosh in it for a second. But I have a ton of wax downstairs. I can make my own freaking candles. I don't need to buy one. So yeah, Lynn Gideon says Hollywood is a copy and paste world these days, nothing original anymore. Yep, and that's a huge part of the problem, which is why I think they're like stunned that stuff out of the Asian market is doing so well. It's like, yeah, but their stuff is original and your stuff is not. Like we're getting to the point where everything's fake or like a redo of something from 20, 30, 40, even 5-10 years ago. And it's starting to, I think, really grate on people. Gretchen says Megan seems desperate, charging more for the same stuff and charging more for her stuff than brands like High Grove that have better following. Yeah. And it just looks like a cash grab and that like you need to justify the costs. And it's just like, I just don't think her things rise to the height of that. Becky says, between bad spelling and autocorrect, changing my words, some days I read as a drunk Carol. Deep Thought says, no, Netflix bought it off the music studio at bargain basement prices, like 20% of what it cost to make. And the studio thought it would flop. Didn't want it releases themselves. A big mistake. Exactly. Like they don't understand Hollywood. I listen to a lot of guys who talk about Hollywood, and I think it's true. There's a lot of smart people, there's a lot of very dumb people in Hollywood who are not understanding. Like I know like K-pop is so popular. There's like a shop at my local mall that has K-pop. There's a lot more anime shops around anymore. Like usually they're at dead malls, but like they still exist. And so, or like growing in existence. And so it's like, you really thought that K-pop Demon Hunter would not do well? Man, I think it was it Sony or Paramount? Whoever sold that show was a fool. Lizzie B says, I would have told the streaming giant to offer them a trial contract for way less money than to see what they had to offer because they didn't know if they had creativity or productivity. Yes, I think especially when it comes to the only reason they got such a big mark in the first place is that everybody was sort of doing it at the time and they wanted the royal family stuff. But I think they were hoping that they had more than that. But Meghan Markle is an excellent BSer. And there's a lot of people in Hollywood like that too. Kind of everybody found out J.J. Abrams is really like that. He's excellent at BS, very, very poor at executing product. And so when you have those kind of issues, yeah. Pan Chem says, hi, Brittany, how does Megan keep her shoes on as she wears a size larger? Why isn't she tripping out of them? That's a good question. I honestly don't know. I had the issue with my heels popping out of shoes, and I find it to be very, very destabilizing. So I'm not sure. P Pacific says, Brittany, a reminder that the King's Trust is globally successful. USA, Canada, all over the world. Prince William is doing fine. Let's support Earthshot. Yeah, but the thing is, whether or not something is successfully global doesn't really matter because what actually matters is what's happening in their country, not really what's happening anywhere else in the world. Because again, the problem with the royals have, or the problem royals can have, is they can have people who think, okay, you care so much about the environment, you're in Brazil, but I can't feed my family. The rent's too much. Like I'm struggling in this way and that way. And you're focused on something I don't give a crap about. That's where you come into problems. Because not everybody agrees and not everybody agrees with more of a global emphasis either. Because they're like, we need to be focusing on what's happening in my country, not what's happening everywhere else. Gaia says we're living in an incredible change in the entertainment industry, and those who work in it need to be always both carefully studying the market and be savvy enough to find ways to make their ideas work. 150%, and there's very few of those people in the industry anymore. Very, very sadly. There's very few of them. Most of them have been chased out, which I think is so sad. For me growing up, going to movies was a huge part of my childhood. I remember seeing The Lion King, Titanic, Star Wars, like the re-release in 97. I remember seeing those, but feels like very little of that anymore in some ways. DS says, oh my goodness, Meghan Markle, your honey is so overpriced. I paid $45 for a 96-ounce glass jar of local organic honey. Where is hers harvested? Thank you so much for the super chat, DS. I have no idea, but I truly, truly think that everything Megan does, like I think she overprices her stuff, like deliberately overprices it. I don't think there's anything good or organic about her stuff. Like that's just my personal opinion, but I've never been impressed with her stuff. The offerings are so pedestrian. And again, her competitors are farmers markets. And I don't think she has established herself enough in like the high luxury space to justify her prices. Alice says, Brittany, you could have a line of candles called Recollections May Vary. We could. Carol said, Yankee candles, $20 for 20 ounce. Bath and Body Works, $25 for 14 ounce. Compared to $64 for 8 ounce. Huge difference. So we'll wrap up here in a minute. Lynn Gideon says, I wouldn't care if she had the most amazing products in the world. I want to give her a dime. And I think a lot of people feel that way. I mean, I think that's true. But again, my suggestion to Megan has always been, which obviously she's never taken, is create the best like products that are so good, people feel like they can't live without them. And that even your haters want to buy them. Like her kind of dumbly going, well, maybe they're criticizing me, but they're probably going home and making like single pot spaghetti. I'm like, no, but because it came across as like, like she knew she was lying, but the relationship was crap, recipe was crap. But if she came up with some really good stuff, like, but her stuff is all like, she literally was teaching us how to boil water. Boil water. It's crazy. Lynn says, outside of sports news, I don't watch and don't have Netflix. Why pay for content when there's so much free stuff on YouTube? Very true. Alice says, Hollywood has been totally captured by the accounts and have become totally risk averse. You have to take risks to make great films, and they just want the Avengers over and over again. Agree. Aram Scout says, there was champagne that Taylor Swift liked for $20. Secret Review said it was good. A wine for $35 is a ripoff. I think so. Lizzie B says, Hollywood is afraid to invest in something completely new because they think it's not going to sell. But look at Godzilla movie. Yeah, Godzilla -1, the Barbie movie, and the Super Mario movie. Yeah, 150%. Although I will say I could not get through the Barbie movie. I gave it about like 5 minutes. I was like, this is horrible. But I have a very, very big passion for Barbie, and I just did not like it. Leo Jackson said, I used to be a K-pop trainee, but left because of how strict the rules were. I wasn't allowed to date, and I had to hang out with girls, only other guys, and my teacher got ticked off at me for eating a cookie. Wow. That's crazy. It is crazy. The K-pop world is insane. Dr. M says, why does she wear such large shoes? I never understood that. Anybody? Double-sided tape would help her keep it in. It's for, you're technically supposed to do it so your feet, so if your feet swell, like they're not like horribly uncomfortable in the shoes, in theory. Alice says, you have to take a risk for the biscuit. They just want to make blockbusters over and over again. And they're spending way, way, way too much. Basically, all movies now, their budgets are between $100 and $200 million, if not upwards of 300, 400, 500 million. Like it's gotten way out of control. And I would go to see movies if there are movies I wanted to see. There's nothing I want to see. KB says, aren't Megan's candles made with beeswax, given that she showed on her show? Why do I ask these questions? Because she clearly doesn't. It's made actually with a whole ton of different waxes, like paraffin, soy. I think beeswax is in there too, like a bunch of different waxes. Lizzie B says, I think it's a Hollywood thing I heard about the movement and not being uncomfortable with a smaller size when acting. We should do a half size and not a whole one. Susan says she's so out of touch she doesn't realize it's overpriced. Yeah. My cat's name is Karen says, I follow Julie Montague. She's an American doing awesome things with her title. I love it. Very awesome. Susan says, even one spot spaghetti. Lynn says they're making Martha Stewart's single pot pasta. Yeah. Carol says Queen Letizia is wearing Victoria Eugenie's Daemon tiara earrings. Yeah, she is. Like it's the biggest ones in the collection. They're very, very pretty. My cat's name is Karen says, I watched Mary Berry's Country Home 4-part series and she went to Sussex and Lord Marsh and has a black brother and sister. Oh, that's so fun. Ritz says boxed wine all the way and it's always on sale. Mary Lou says it's spring there. Oh, awesome. In Australia. So Alice says the golden age of Hollywood's 30s, 40s. It's just been downhill since then. I mean, there was some good moments, but yeah. Lizzie B said, my point is, Brittany, is that the Barbie movie sold and became a trend. Very true. Everyone was wearing pink. Nostalgia sold that movie. I agree. That's 100% correct. I didn't like it, but a lot of other people did. And it was like had a global moment. I went and saw Oppenheimer because I was a lot more interested in seeing Oppenheimer than Barbie. But it came Barbenheimer, you know, like I don't even know if even the marketing people made that up or other people did. Like the wisdom of the crown can actually be somewhat helpful. Aaron Scott says, my husband loves K-dramas. I don't see anything else. That's so funny. Lynn says, actors are just like athletes are unbelievably overpaid. I do think that. Ritz says, remember that she's a mom. Carol says, Department Q is amazing series that takes place in Scotland about cold cases. I have seen the trailer for that, and I did want to see that. Solomons says, which tiara do you think Princess Leonor will be given as her first? I'm not sure. Maybe the Prussian. That's the first one her mom had, and so that might be the one she wears. That's the one her mom wore to her wedding. My cat's name is Karen. Says she has to get shoes big for her bunions to fit. And The Gilded Age is a great show. Metabolic says Eclipse in Australia 2028. My last chance. That'll be pretty amazing. I gotta say. My cat's name is Karen. Says Oppenheimer was great. Christopher Nolan is awesome. He is. I love that movie just from the historian aspect. Lizzie B says, Alice, there's 90s were good with movies. I remember one with Anna Paquin, Fly Away Home. I love that movie. Yeah, I think the 90s were like a great movie era up to the early 2000s. And it was Matt Walsh who did, I guess, a video talking about, I haven't actually watched it, but I've watched other people commentate on it. And he apparently says that after 2008, movies died. Like basically pop culture died. And it's like social media, I know is one of his factors, but there was other ones and I can't quite remember. Lynn says, I love the UK shows, but I have some with closed captions till I get used to the accents. Yep. Shaz says, I love that film, Lizzie B. Have it on video and DVD. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for sticking around for a little bit of a chat time. And so I appreciate you all. The Crown Report is always so fun to do. I look forward to doing it every week. And again, super exciting. Tomorrow, I can actually send the Crown Report email with all the little tidbits of royal news that we didn't get to cover here. So guys, thank you so much for tuning in, and I shall speak to you again very soon. Bye.